Hi there! I couldn't see you over all these role-playing game books. Oh my god. There are a lot of role-playing games out there in the world that are not called D&D, and many of them we love quite a good deal, and that's why we're here today on Welcome Home. We're going to talk about games not called D&D. Not that we don't love D&D, because I certainly do. I run a game of it every week, but there's a lot of gems out there in the world. With the huge explosion of indie games, which we're going to have a whole own thing on, talking with indie folk. But today, with this huge growth in the industry, what I would call the third golden age of role-playing games. First one in the 80s, second one in the 90s, and then there was kind of a dead period there. And then now we're back again with the re-emergence of the indie movement and Dungeons & Dragons 5e, bringing more and more people into the hobby. What else is out there, man? What can you play that doesn't involve a d20, or doesn't involve class levels, or doesn't involve tromping around a dungeon and stabbing dragons? There's tons of stuff out there, and that's why we're here. So I'm incredibly excited to bring you today's second episode at our official time, 6 p.m. Eastern every week, of Welcome Home, the Welcome to the Party role-playing game talk show. This week, with me, I have three amazing people, each with a depth and breadth of experience in games not called D&D. And so let's go around and say hello to each of them, starting with Nerdy Teddy.
Hey everybody, I'm Nerdy Teddy. You can follow me on Twitter at Nerdy Teddy. And
Sweet.
I play a lot of games that are powered by the apocalypse, which I won't actually be talking about tonight.
Not at all?
No, the games I'm thinking about aren't powered by the apocalypse. One of them is adjacent, but and has some stuff related to it, but
I'm very surprised by that. But 4!
My name is Four, and I am here to discuss primarily Mouse Guard, but other games that have been under my radar in terms of games I would love to play, but do not have time to play. But probably, I'm the kind of RPG player / runner that likes to read role-playing games. Like, I read them just as like healthily as a fictional book. So yeah, that's what you'll expect from me.
Sweet. And Jack.
Hey everybody, I am Capjack, or at Captain Jake Cross on the Twitters, and I am definitely going to be shining a big old spotlight on the World of Darkness, just all over the place.
Awesome. Amazing.
So that is my dear gaming love.
Yay. And I'm Sean, also known as Throck Plays. And I'm here with some of my favorite people to play games with, so I'm very excited. And I have been doing role-playing games for a long time, so I have a lot of different things to talk about from all across the genres. We're gonna cut this up into 3 sections, actually. We're gonna be talking about fantasy role-playing games, then modern role-playing games, and then futuristic role-playing games. And so, yes, these are all in a terrestrial timeline, but if you have games that live outside of that space that you would like to talk about, you should feel free as well. And there certainly are some out there. Monty Cook with like Numenera and stuff like that certainly kind of live outside what we would call a timeline, at least in the way that we would understand the role-playing now. So, a couple of quick notes before we begin. First, if you would like to ask questions, feel free to do so. Throw them into chat. We'll keep track of them. We'll throw them into the thing, and we'll figure out the best time to ask them. This is a roundtable type discussion, so we're going to ask a question. Everybody's going to get a chance to answer it, and then we'll go on to the next question. If you have things you want to throw in there, you should absolutely feel free, and we'll do our best to answer them. Last but not least, of course, we have to thank all of our amazing sponsors on every show, because we're contractually obligated by law. No, it's because we love them. So first and foremost, thank you to Roll20. They are our season sponsor, as we are a member of the Roll20 Spotlight program, and you can get a free subscription to their amazing virtual tabletop by clicking on the link below. Use that link, and you will get a free subscription to Roll20, and it'll help us out. So please do that. Second, Tabletop Loot. Tabletop Loot is your best place on the internet for dice, where you can get 15% off your next Tabletop Loot order by using the code WTTPDICE. And of course, So Nerdware. So Nerdware is our official merch sponsor. Right there, Capjack's wearing a So Nerdware t-shirt. And you can get 10% off your next purchase of all sorts of amazing loot from So Nerdware by using the code WELCOME at checkout. So Nerdware, it's what the nerds wear. And with that, don't forget to check out our Patreon and our Discord. They're both amazing, and we love you very much. So, actually, I'm going to throw you all for a loop at the beginning, and I'm going to ask a really quick question going around the table to everyone. That is, how long have you been role-playing, and how many different games do you own or have played? Like, I'm very interested in your breadth of experience. This is a couple minutes, right? Like, we don't need huge stories on everything, but what do you own? What's your background like?
Long ago.
Yes, back in my day, when I was, yeah. And we'll start where we started to begin with Nerdy.
Yeah, so about 5 years, give or take a little bit of time. And I own a lot more games than I've played. There's a lot of PDFs that I have laying around, and more that I consider all the time. Just
Yeah.
I may have to try you. So a lot of games.
What was your first?
D&D.
It was D&D
3.5.
3.5. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. 4. What's your kind of background experience?
It's been about 10 years since I really started putting role-playing and dice into the same frying pan. And it really took its beginning in Mouse Guard by Luke Crane and David Peterson. I would have played Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition as my first, but we might talk about that and how online discourse sometimes does make a difference on when and how players enter the hobby. But Mouse Guard is by far my favorite.
Awesome. And Jack.
Yeah, so I've been playing since the late 90s, and my first system was Vampire, just like old school World of Darkness. And it's still got that very special place in my heart.
Yeah, mine too. I've been playing since the late 80s because I'm fucking ancient. And my first system was Palladium, but very closely followed by Advanced D&D 2nd edition. And so I've been active in role-playing games since, and you saw those books, and there's just more right over here. So yeah, first big question to go around to the team. We're looking for games that you love in the fantasy world that aren't D&D. Why do you love them? What is it about them that speaks to you? What does it give you that D&D doesn't? We're going to go in the opposite order for this one and start with Jack.
So as far as systems that are in the fantasy genre that I really, really love, I mean, I think it's going to have to start with Dungeon World. It seems to me it's an almost spiritual opposite to Dungeons and Dragons, whereas in D&D you have, your character, you build your character, your stats, and kind of that dictates where you're going to go with a lot of things. Versus in Dungeon World, yeah, you have, you have moves. You have a couple things that you can do, but a lot of what Dungeon World is creating the story as you're creating your character and playing to find out how that world develops. And I have really, really come to love the ability to play to find out kind of set. I just love that so much. And my first intro to that was this past year with Throck. It was a pirate game, and I fell in love with that system immediately.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I mean, I love Dungeon World. For Nerdy, I don't know if you've played it, but to give you all a little bit more context, Dungeon World is kind of the next generation of the Powered by Apocalypse role-playing game, where you choose a playbook and you roll d6s to see how well you do, and when you fail things, you get experience. And for one, I think that's super cool, right? Like, it was one of the first times that I played a fantasy role-playing game other than Burning Wheel, where failure moved you forward in that way. And so mechanic-wise, Jack, what's your, what really drew you into it? You told us about kind of how you felt about it and the whole leave spaces, but are there crunchy bits about it you really love?
I mean, the games of it that I've been part of, it's been and you mentioned it's very powered by the apocalypse. So it has it's like with Monster of the Week, which is another game that I super love, which but also, yeah, the crunchy bits that I love are how all the different moves. When you do an investigation check in D&D, you're investigating.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, that's one thing, one skill, versus a Dungeon World skill. Let me pull this up. Let me see. Just grab a move really quick while something opens. Let's see, Swashbuckler. Sure, why not? That was fun. Move. Let's say you want to do. Sure, parry. Yeah, parry. There's a lot of ways you can use it though, versus just okay, the blade's out of the way. All right, no, but you can also use parry to move an object or move a person. It's the versatility of skills, which
Yeah.
is something that I absolutely super love. It's not just this one skill does this one thing. It's this one skill has a range of things you can do. And that's what I like. It allows you to be more creative, I think, in the way that you're playing a character and what you're able to do versus the very static way that D&D works, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's right as well. There's big open narrative space all over the place. And you can do those things with D&D, but it's not expressly built that way, right? D&D itself in 5e tells you to break the rules, but it has those very specific parameters for things like spell slots and whatnot that kind of don't exist in the same way, I think, in the Powered by the Apocalypse stuff.
Yeah,
Right.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and I think that's one of Power of the Apocalypse strengths is it lets you sink into the narrative more and lets people define their characters within, yes, in Masks you have directly engage a threat, but it's up to the characters how they decide to use that rather than, if you're a wizard, you're going to be a wizard. There's only so much room you can do within that. Where in these kind of games, they tell you, hey, go, take it to where you want it to, and especially in Masks, yes, okay, your character has this thing called light manipulation, but you define it.
Right. You have the more of the authorial intent is in the hands of the players than in a game like D&D. Is that fair to say, you think?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. So, Jack, if you were to leave people with a one-sentence pitch on why to play Dungeon World, what would that be?
My one sentence pitch would be play your way. That's the best way I can describe it. Is this is a system, if you want to play your way, two people can play the same character on the same class completely.
Yeah. Play your way. Dungeon World. I like it. Sweet. Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of Dungeon World as well. 4. Do you have a specific... I am very interested in what your fantasy game of choice that you would like to tell these wonderful people about may be.
If you couldn't guess, it's Mouse Guard, the role-playing game. So just to give you a little forward, you should go ahead and read Mouse Guard, the comic books by David Peterson. They are outstanding works of fiction in comic format, and they do something that I believe D&D does not do well enough, and that is imagination. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? I mean, for a game to not only immerse a player in its story and the character, I think it's also important to have players easily become immersed in the world that their character is set in. And what better way to do that than to literally point out your backyard and say, you live in that. You are this big, you are fuzzy, and you have a sword that is no bigger than a little pin. Good luck. And then, at that point, it's a stunningly interactive game. Characters like to I've run almost exclusively Mouse Guard on Twitch, from a Western style campaign, Western Marches style campaign, where we had several dozen players playing all at the same time, doing things with their characters, trying to build up a community. And I've also done campaigns where it's just one patrol taking a very specific mission to heart. And it can really branch out into any sort of fantasy story you want. You could have a whole campaign about delivering mail, because you have to also just imagine the problems that mice have if they're trying to live in a human style way of life. Trying to thrive when you're constantly assailed by predators that are as big as your houses, and storms and weather that could ravage your entire landscape. Every year is it's just filled with a titanic feeling of strife, and being able to conquer that as a group of players is really intense.
Yeah, and so I want to dig into one thing you said there a little bit more, because first of all, I'm in your current Mouse Guard campaign here on Welcome to the Party, and it's amazing. Queens. Yes, and I got to tell you, those moments when you think about, like, oh, here comes a vole riding on a crab. It wasn't a vole. I can't remember what it was.
It was a vole, and she was on a crab.
Yeah, it was a vole riding a crab, and I'm like, I'm this tall. A crab is like a dragon to me, right? And
that's intense. Like, yeah. You could tell a player, hey, go slay this dragon. And they'll be like, ah, yes, I'm going to slay that dragon. Me and my companions, with our magics and our metal, we will vanquish the beast. I tell you in Mouse Guard to go kill a snake or a crab, you are daunted by the task.
Yes. And that is a huge difference in scope, first of all, like just narratively speaking. But you also brought up something interesting where you said, I think it was, Mouse Guard allows you to dive more narratively into the game than you think Dungeons & Dragons was. I have one comment on that and then a question for you. The comment is, I think a lot of that is always going to be GM dependent, and you can have very narrative D&D games. But what I'm interested in is, because I think I know what you're talking about, mechanically, why is that so? Why does it allow you to drive more narratively into the game?
Two things make this format work for Mouse Guard. The first is that the manner of play. We take turns telling the story. Every session starts with the GM's turn, where the GM presents your mission, and then you encounter obstacles over time. And no matter how you roll, whether you fail or if you succeed, the mission will continue. It will never reach a dead end. And then you go to the player's turn, where the players get to dictate what happens after the mission. They get to pursue their relationships, recover from some of the twists and conditions that might have occurred during the GM's turn. And they also get to open up whatever story elements they want from the second part, which is their beliefs and instincts. Mm-hmm. And goals as well, if the GM remembers to tell them to write one down for the session. Each character has a belief and an instinct. They have a statement that sort of outlines their role in the world, not only just as like a personality quirk, but as a Mouse Guard. And that's another thing that I think Mouse Guard does better than Dungeons & Dragons, is that you're immediately brought together with your fellow players. You don't have to worry about meeting in a tavern. You don't have to worry about finding a reason to go adventuring. You have that reason. You are a Mouse Guard. You are a member of an order of noble and proud mice that are trying to save the territories from, everyday disaster. It's so straightforward, and it doesn't waste any words or time with roles that don't matter or characters that don't know how to change over time. Because if I know your belief, I know what I need to do to challenge your character and essentially ask you if you really believe the world is going to keep working the way that your character believes.
Right, and it's also a classless and levelless system too. Yeah.
It's very now the second edition does have a the most class play you could do in Mouse Guard is the ranks. A guard captain is going to be very different from a tender paw, but I think that also just sort of flavors your character. It gives them experience, it gives them a set number of skills, depending on which edition you're playing. And I just really love how free form it is.
And this actually it's got a lineage to it too, right? Because it comes from Burning Wheel.
Yep, it comes from Luke Crane, who made Burning Wheel, and after the revised edition of Burning Wheel, he worked with David Peterson. By the way, the book is beautiful. It is quite possibly one of the most gorgeous books I have in my collection. And the art is fantastic. The writing is pretty gorgeous, and the game is fun to play, and it's very simple to play. It rewards your players for role playing, it teaches them how to role play, and it opens them up to more parts of this gaming hobby that once they're more, used to and experienced with how dice and role playing interact, they'll find other games like Dungeons and Dragons that might fill a certain itch when talking mice battling a muskrat that needs to be evicted can't give you that.
Sure. It's definitely its own flavor of game. I'm interested, Nerdy or Jack, have you ever had the chance to play it or check it out?
No, never played it. I am fascinated by the whole idea of, you start with that common purpose. I know in our current Dungeons and Dragons game that you're running, Throck, we did what we're calling a hot start, which is you're all together already. And the fact that you need to have a kind of a hot start in order for people to care about each other and stuff is kind of like a little bit. So no, I like that it builds that into the system a lot.
Yeah.
Especially if it's with newer players.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the things I love about Mouse Guard is that it's so approachable in a lot of ways because we grew up on cartoons with little Mises, right? And so I think it's pretty easy for people to put themselves in the place of I'm now this little mouse living in a big scary world. Everything from from Nim to Watership Down, even to the Chipmunks, or what's the adventure one that was awesome with the little chipmunks?
Rescue Rangers?
Rescue Rangers.
Yeah.
Right. There's all these little
I got a whole rant about Secret of
Oh, man. The lore is real.
Yeah.
A lot of people compare it to Redwall, except Mouse Guard's setting makes sense.
I don't know anything about Redwall.
And it's not all about food porn. I will read Redwall, the first book, and the second one, Matimo, eagerly. The rest of the books are filled with lots of food.
What is Redwall?
You don't know what Redwall is?
Why would I know what Redwall? What?
Redwall is a book by Brian Jacques.
Okay.
I think that's how you say it.
Is it a role-playing game or a novel?
It is a series of novels.
Okay.
And Redwall is an abbey, and there are animals that live in it, not just mice, but moles, badgers, and other creatures. And they all live happily. They have many feasts, and they're all sort of the same size. It's sort of difficult to understand whether the world they're living in is anthropomorphic human-sized creatures, or if they're still little tiny creatures. And Brian really likes food.
Okay. So it's a lot about
also
food.
That is not a negative selling point to me.
If you love rats and if you love ferrets and weasels or anything else that is possibly a carnivore, they're all evil. It doesn't matter. They're all evil and they should be destroyed. That is the consensus of every book. That's why I don't like it.
Huh. Right on. So, one line pitch for Mouse Guard.
It is not what you fight, but what you fight for.
Oh, I like that. That's great. And that's very, yeah, that's awesome. And very true if you've ever played the game. Okay. Nerdy. What do you got for us?
So I got a game that you can actually, if you're interested in it, you can get the PDF for free right now on Drive Through RPG. I don't know if it's always like that, but I'm going to talk about Iron Sworn, which is sort of Powered by the Apocalypse adjacent. It does utilize moves, and I haven't got to play it, but I do want to. One of the big selling points for me ended up being that this game is, because of the way the moves are set up, you can play it what they call guided. You can play co-op, or you can play solo. So you can play GM-less. You can just run the game yourself, and you can have a GM. So I like that. It's a big thing to me. But the big thing, the game focuses more. It's less on, okay, we got hired to go find this dragon, and we're gonna go slay our way through monsters to the dragon. It focuses on the actual quest to go from point A to point B, crossing dangerous
travel.
rivers.
Yeah.
Right, it's about the travel. It has so your weapons don't have stats. They exist, but they don't have stats unless you have like a special training in it. You can get stuff like that. So you might have a bonus for using your weapon, but your weapons themselves don't actually have stats, because it's mostly about the adventure. So if you come up to a dangerous river, you will use the move, face danger, and then cross the river. You'd cross it. You don't keep track of all your stats. So if you have a bow, of all your gear, so as long as you have a bow, or if you have a bow and as long as you still have supplies, you have arrows. But if you fail your face the danger roll going across the river, you could lose supplies, which is it's counted like 1 to 5.
Sure.
And if you run out of supplies, then you're in trouble. There's moves for setting camp, for there's combat, of course. There's relationship moves, everything from aid your ally to forge a bond. You can try to compel people to do things. It's got a lot to it. It's a little bit more crunchy than I normally like, but I really fell in love with the adventure, the focus on the landscape and the adventuring aspect, rather than, okay, you traveled 2 miles, now you're in a cave and there's goblins everywhere.
Right. So it does sound a lot like it takes some inspiration from Lord of the Rings, in that one of the most important parts of Lord of the Rings is the journey itself, right? And the travails you have on the way to the thing that you're trying to do. Is the setting like high fantasy, or is it low fantasy? Like, what's the feel of the game?
They consider it dark fantasy.
Okay, so it's grimdarky. Yeah.
Yeah. I believe there's Fae in the game, but you're kind of been exiled to another continent, and there's not like cities. There's maybe a few villages here and there, and the weather's harsh and the landscape is harsh, and so it's a little darker in that way.
Can I make a confession?
Yeah.
I don't like moves. I think they're okay for
Really?
players, but I don't like them for GMs, because they're almost too nebulous to describe, right? Like, and maybe that's the point, and maybe I just like a little bit more definition in my games, but like, the concept of moves seems to further abstract something that is already so context dependent that I don't think it needs more abstraction. Because like, if you as the player go, I make a defy danger move, right? Okay, describe to me how that move works and make a roll. Sweet. Cool. I get that. That makes sense. However, if I have to then make a move against you if you fail, which is essentially what GM moves are, they're reactions to things that the players do, I'm already essentially doing that by dictating the stakes of the roll. So it's one of the things I like about Blades in the Dark is that I, as the GM, I don't make moves, I tell you the stakes, right? And to me, that just feels like a much more elegant iteration of the move system.
Oh yeah,
Right? Rather than being like, now I have to think, am I going to do an inflict harm or am I going to do a whatever, right? Like, it's okay, so you're fighting this group of toughs and you want to use finesse to try and knock a couple of them out and escape. And I will tell you that if you fail, you're going to take a level 2 harm and you're still stuck there and you have to find another way out. If you get a conditional success, you might take a level 1 harm. You've knocked a couple of them out, but you've found an escape route, but you're going to need a second test to... It turns into a chase. And if you roll a 6, you get away scot-free, right? And so the definition of the stakes to me, and I'm interested in your thoughts on... I'm interested in everybody's thoughts on this. The definition of stakes in a rule set, to me, is really important. Like, one of the things I think D&D does best is you always know what the stakes are in D&D, right? Like... because you have hit points and because you have spell slots and because you have all of these different like cost benefit mechanisms, one of the things D&D does well is it tells you what the cost of your actions are, whether if you fail or whether you do the thing. And one of my core issues with a lot of some of the newer games is that cost isn't always there. And I feel like meaningful choices require cost, right? And so sometimes it's just like, I did the thing, yay, okay, sweet. So you just did the thing where there's no dramatic tension to me in that. And so I'm just interested in all of your thoughts on that.
Jack, do you want to go first?
All right, cool. I see everyone else.
Because I can tear into this pretty hard.
All right. I don't always like the idea of giant stakes on the end of things. Like I like player created stakes a lot.
So go more deeply into that, right? Like, I in my mind, I wasn't saying that all the stakes are always major, right? I was just saying that you kind of always know what those stakes are, whether it's I've used one arrow or I've used one spell slot, which aren't major stakes, or I make a perception check and I either make it or don't make it, right? And so I mean, because that's the part of that I'm interested in, because I kind of like player-defined stakes too. Although I always worry about wish fulfillment with that a little bit, and then like, why are we telling a story if the player's defining all the stakes to begin with? But that's just a personal philosophy. But I'm more interested in the stakes piece of that. I'm sorry, the cost benefit piece of that you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, well, going to what you're saying with D&D, you always know the stakes. It's yes, no, and I like, throw me some more shades of gray. I mean, it's going to come back to World of Darkness. Give me some shades of gray in that. I don't always want to know what the pass fail is going to be. I want there to be a range of, okay, there could be some really good things that happen. There could be some really bad things that happen. There could just be some medium things that happen that could build into a big or a big good or bad thing later. You know, let it.
But isn't that a GM
hard
thing?
Yes, no.
Isn't that a GM? That's not really a D&D thing, though. That's just a GM choice to how to adjudicate successes and failures, right?
I mean, when it comes to HP, no, because I mean, you have a hard fail spot.
Yeah, but like outside combat, right? Like, yes, D&D has a very defined system, right? But I think it is unfair to compare that system to systems that aren't equally defined in terms like, I'm thinking more in your run-of-the-mill role-playing, right? Like, once you get into the combat system, yes, you have very defined outcomes, and that's what it is, right? But outside of combat, when you're dealing with all the how do I navigate dangers? How do I talk to people? How do I interact with the world? It's not really a zero-sum game, is it?
I don't think so, but honestly, kind of who cares if everyone's having fun?
oh, sure, but I mean,
yeah. I mean, yeah, you can ratchet up the tension or down the tension. You know there's the DM or GM's role right there is, how do I want to ratchet the tension in a direction, And it's playing off. It's interactive storytelling in that respect of you're playing off each other more.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting that you say that, because I feel like one of the awesome things about, and wait, I know for you had a bunch of thoughts on this, so I just want to throw it to you. My brain's going in a million different directions, but you had a ton of thoughts on this.
Okay, so we're talking about moves, and
Yes.
It's been a long time. I don't play a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse, sadly. So moves are kind of like, so you get a playbook, right? And
Yes.
I'm legit asking a question.
Yes, you get a
Yes,
playbook,
yes.
and it gives you moves.
And it gives you like certain moves that compel the story to go in a certain direction. So I think it's just another way of giving the player agency in terms of the trope that they want to play. I want to play a big warrior. That means I'm going to use moves that profess my strength and stuff like that. Giving the GM that sort of power, I think. Yes, Zoe, I know.
Oh, hi, Zoe.
Giving the GM that sort of power, I think, isn't bad. It's just the GM should have does the GM have a series of moves that only they have access to?
Yes.
It depends on the game.
Yeah, but
Okay.
classical PBTA,
Because-
yes.
Oh my god. Oh, I have one, and it's a hold on. Oh my god. Oh my god. I forgot about this game. Oh my god. Look at this. Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay, so this is Apelion, a dragon epic RPG powered by the Apocalypse, and it is a magnificent game in which you play dragons trying to make the world a better place. So in games that are powered by the Apocalypse, it seems to me like they generally want to give agency to the players in certain fashions, and the GM has ways to influence the story in case they fail. I like that and I respect it, but I don't enjoy how limiting it could possibly be.
I agree with that.
I think limiting I both hate and love the nature of playbooks and moves. I love that a character can be broken down to a very basic meat and bones. Like if a character has a thematic element to their playbook, they should be able to bring it out through the moves that are in the playbook. So that comes into conflict when the GM's moves and the player's moves don't necessarily coincide with the thematic elements that are in your campaign or in the game itself. And that, I think, will cause a lot of friction in terms of a good story. And I think, one, we do play these games for fun, and I think that moves are exceptional at allowing players to influence things in the way they want to. That's great. More games need that.
Yes.
However, when we want to expand on something that is not only just entertainment, but the invisible link that is underneath the stories that we naturally tell, I think moves limits the game rather than improves it.
Yeah, and
Because you said because here's the thing, you brought up Blades in the Dark,
Yeah.
and you liked how you had so many options to in case a player failed to roll. Like you could inflict stress, you could harm the player, you could do all sorts of things. I don't like having a lot of options. I have trouble running Blades in the Dark. I cannot decide what is best. I am the type of person where if there are so many options, I think every option is good. And if I choose an option, I immediately think that option is bad.
yeah.
Unless I have a clear, concise idea on what the story is about and how we can move it in the direction it needs to go. The problem with Blades in the Dark is that it's a fantastic heist game.
Indeed.
It's very little else.
No, it is built to be that, right? It is built to be how do you interact with criminals, how do you build your criminal empire, and then how do you do heists, right? Like
Exactly.
that is, and it does that one thing well. And I think it's interesting.
Tremendously.
This goes kind of back to what Jack said as well,
I'm
where
going to talk more about that in later moments.
with the player empowerment piece, which I think is incredibly important, right? Players should absolutely feel empowered to make awesome moves and kind of know what their character tastes and feels like, for lack of a better term. And you went into that as well, and I think that is one of the places where you have to do more work in D&D. In fact, I obviously think it's lacking because I added mechanics for those in my new campaign.
And it needed it.
Yeah, and it's every game. Like, on the one hand, every game has its own strengths and weaknesses, but on the other hand, there's definitely a push, I think, in modern role-playing design to allow mechanical expressions of character direction, right? Which I think is good. When
But
done
Mouse Guard
well.
already has that.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that when I talk about Burning Wheel as well. Yeah, it is a thing that has existed in a very solid way for a while.
I'm
And
shameless.
also,
I'm sorry.
yeah, no, it's totally fine. And here's the thing, Vampire the Masquerade, World of Darkness games, lots of games had it before, but it's coming back again in a new way, right? I do want to get to who haven't we asked for fantasy?
We're just doing.
Wait, was it me? Or was it?
He's talking about me. Or I think
Yeah, we're still talking about you and
Oh my God,
the
we
only
just
person is you.
Oh, okay,
Correct.
yeah.
I think
So
other than Iron Sword, and I kind of said my piece on that. Other than if you want me to do it,
And I'm always looking forward to new games, and this one looks really fun. So
Yeah.
this is what I love being here for this.
do you have any final thoughts on Iron Sword? Because I feel like that was a pretty robust discussion on player choice. Unless there did any final thoughts on that? No.
I feel like it's going to come up. It's going to be a common.
It's gonna be-
It's going to be a common theme.
Yeah.
I think the thing about Powered by the Apocalypse and Blades in the Dark is that you just got to know what you're doing, both as a GM and a player. And if you don't, you kind of need to build the game from the ground up to do it. You need to create new moves for the type of game that your players are going to be in and what role they play in that world.
Yeah.
You can't play a political game with Dungeon World. You can't play a game about really nice people doing really nice things and Blaze in the Dark, because
Truth.
the game will punish you for that.
Yes.
And that means you have to create a whole new game. And in terms of game designers, we have already seen it work. Voila, Epilon. Voila, Iron Sword. Voila, DC Mutants in the Night, which is a fantastic game about building communities in the system of Blades in the Dark. And I feel like we're in this era of tabletop role-playing games where more often than not, we have games that need to be modified in order to tell the stories we need to tell. And I think that's both a problem and a very good benefit, because it's getting a lot of people into game design.
Here's the thing. I think you're 100% right, and I view it as majority problematic. And here's why. Because games, especially the deeper you get into the indie world, the games that you find are so hyper-specific on a single topic as to be useful for one or two campaigns, right?
But that's like saying It's a Wonderful Life is too much about Christmas.
Is it though? Because how many times a year do you watch A Wonderful Life?
Once.
Oh, every year! It's a
Once.
classic!
Watch
That's
it.
right.
I don't.
Once!
I've actually never seen it.
Oh my god!
And this is my thing, right? So there is, I think, in role-playing design now, there is a core tension between, like, breadth of storytelling and depth of storytelling. And everybody finds kind of a middle ground in that, which is actually a perfect segue to Burning Wheel, which goes for
You know
breadth.
what?
Oh, I'm ready. Bring
Really
it.
quick on that, Throck, you'll remember this, but I don't think Nerdy or for either of you were playing at the time. But back in the late 90s, Universal Systems was huge.
Absolutely.
Oh my god,
Everyone
GURPS.
was,
GURPS?
See? Yeah, GURPS, Besom, stuff like that, where
Yeah.
like the entire purpose of the system was you can do anything with it.
Yeah.
And man, and you could do a lot
Full
of
circle.
stuff.
We've come full circle, everybody.
yeah.
Yeah.
History
Well, I
repeats
think
itself.
It's a cycle.
Yeah.
In the 80s, it was the hyper-specific games with D&D. In the 90s, it was choose-your-own-adventure style. In the early 2000s.
Oh,
And
did you
now
know that there
currently
were
we're doing
they were like
I don't know what they were
Like,
good at back then.
I love that you brought. So you said it's Iron Sword, right?
Nerdy.
Nerdy.
Iron Sworn.
Iron Sword. I'm sorry. You said it could be played solo.
Yes.
There were books back then that could be played solo as well. Like there were Narnia books that were choose your own adventure,
I never.
and they
saw
had like
Narnia system
stats in them.
once. What?
Yes.
Oh my god.
You could put stats in your Narnia character, and they would carry over to the next book in the series. And they were choose your own adventure. Yeah, it was intense.
Yeah. Okay.
But like I feel like are we repeating history in a sense that stories are just universal and we're going to tell them in
We're
very
always going to tell the
specific
same
ways.
stories in different ways. Yeah, and so
in
we're doing
different
it
ways,
again.
but also the same ways, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, yes, I think that's 100% right, and that brings us. I'm going to do my segue now for the third time.
Oh yeah,
damn it.
Burning Wheel.
Yeah, and that brings us to Burning Wheel, which is a setting agnostic, low fantasy.
You already got me breathing in through my nostrils.
It is low fantasy, and it is
Low setting though.
it is low
Keep
fantasy
going.
setting.
I will have my upset moment.
Okay. It is relatively setting. No, you know what? It's actually not setting agnostic. It's in fact incredibly Eurocentric. It is actually.
That's what I meant.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
No, you are correct. It is incredibly Eurocentric. But the reason I like this game, one, is because it has informed a lot of shit that's come along since. Burning Wheel has been around since I think 1999 in its original form, which I have the original books around here somewhere, and is now on like its gold edition revised, which came out
Yes,
last
it's
year. This year.
incredible.
And this is a classless, XP-less system in which you build a character by choosing life paths. You are born into some setting, whether you were born in a city, whether you were born in a village, whether you were born a noble, and then you choose life paths along the way. Like, okay, so I was born a noble, then I became a squire, and then I became then I became a page, then I became a squire, then I became a knight, right? It'll be 4 life paths for you to become a knight. You're probably 25 or 26, and each one of these life paths gives you a certain amount of resources to spend on your character during character creation. It gives you certain specific skills you must take, and it gives you a pool of points to spend on other skills. So instead of saying, I want to be a wizard, and then choosing a wizard class and just plugging in what it is, or I have this playbook and getting the 3 things for that playbook, you build your past in order to kind of define where you're moving in the future, which is super cool. It uses a similar system to Mouse Guard because Mouse Guard is a baby of this book. It is a more simplified system.
Mouse Guard is Burning Wheel light.
Mouse Guard is 100% Burning Wheel light, and it does a lot of things, I think, in some ways even better than Mouse Guard, or than Burning Wheel does. But essentially, it is a D6 system, much like Mouse Guard or much like Shadowrun, where 4, 5s, or 6s are successes, 1, 2s, and 3s are failures, and every time you fail, you get tests. Every time you succeed, you get tests. These are ways, depending on how tough the skill is, essentially, how tough it was to do it. For every roll, there is an obstacle. That is how many successes you need in order to get there and make the thing happen. And if you happen to fail something with a high obstacle, it is going to advance your character. And so rather than having a predetermined course to the future, you are defined by the skills in which you use throughout the game. And then the last big piece of this that I think is just lovely is the beliefs, instincts, and goals that Four talked about with Mouse Guard. So you know what your character cares about. You know what your character will do in any given moment, right? And you can almost predefine these as scripts with instincts. Just out of curiosity, stream, is it locking up, or is that just on my end because I have vaguely crappy internet?
It looks good.
Looks good to me.
Okay. And so what that means is
Really quick,
Yeah.
is Burning Wheel the game where you can die in character creation?
no. That was an
No.
early
Oh, okay.
edition of Traveler.
Travel.
Yeah,
Got it.
Yeah,
got
that
it,
is
got
not
it.
current
So
edition
sad.
of Traveler, but it was an earlier. There are a couple other games where you can die in character creation as well. Rollmaster, you could die in character creation, but that was most notably heard as an early edition of Traveler. So what does that mean? What is Burning Wheel? Burning Wheel is where you define a human being and then play out the course of their life. It is much more deadly than a normal fantasy game in that I could hit you once with my sword if you fail to block me in combat and possibly kill you if I roll really, really well. And if I wound you, it's going to take months of healing. This is a low fantasy game. There is magic in it. There are like prayers and things like that, but they take time to cast, or they have a low chance of success for a lot of the religious stuff. It's about your character and their course through a plot that is normally not very combat heavy. There will definitely be combat, but you should be terrified by it. And in fact, you have a stat in this game called Steel. Steel is how well you stand up to the stress of terrifying things. And you always roll it at the beginning of combat, because combat means that you could get disemboweled in one hit in this game, because it's more realistic. It is.
I like Michi's descriptor a lot on that.
Well, the reason I call it low fantasy instead of high realism is because there's magic, there's elves, there's dwarves, there's orcs, and so to me it is a low fantasy setting as opposed to like an Ars Magica, which is to me would fit much more into the high realism setting, because other than the single component of magic, it is an accurate historical depiction of a time and its life, right? And so this has much more of the fantasy to it than a game like Ars Magica does. And so that's the only reason I push back. I think it's a relatively okay descriptor, but in my brain they kind of work in different ways. Yeah. But so the reason I love the game and the reason I'm incredibly frustrated by the game is because it can be intensely complex. Everything is defined, not in like how you execute it or how you define your actions, but the method by which you go through it. Whether you want to engage in a debate or combat, both of these have their own mechanics for how you do them. You literally build a body of argument in like really important debates, and then you make your rolls and you play it out, right? And the terrifying thing, and I don't like the combat
totally know
system.
why you love this game now.
Yeah, I don't. Here's the thing: I don't love their advanced combat system, because what you have to do in the game is
Blow by blow.
oh my god, and it is the most tedious part of the game. And whenever I run it, I never use it. I just use the quick and dirty combat, because here's what you have to do. You are given a list, and let me see if I can find it as I'm talking, of possible options you can take for essentially 3 rounds of combat, right? And during those 3 rounds of combat, if you don't script a block and someone else scripts a hit on you, you can either forfeit a future action of those 3 actions to attempt to block it, or you just take the hit. So you're blind plotting out 3 moves in advance all the time, and everyone reveals simultaneously. The problem is, bookkeeping-wise, especially for the GM, this is an enormous ass pain, right? Like, it's also like, it feels unfair to the players to me sometimes, right? Because we're not actually medieval combatants who can like think logically 3 steps ahead about our thrust, parries, and stabs. And so that is the one piece of this, both due to it being onerous and because it is incredibly punishing, that I feel like is kind of a holdover from previous generations of role-playing. But my overall thought on Burning Wheel is this. If you're looking for an amazing, crunchy game where you get to define literally everything about your character, from the bottom to the top, from where you were born to where you are to where you want to go, and then have a skills-based advancement system, you can do much, much worse than this game. There's a reason it's the progenitor of games like Powered by the Apocalypse or Blades in the Dark, right? Because it has all of these amazing systems that in future iterations were boiled down to be a bit more simplistic, but still keep that same feel of self-definition without the crunch. And so, again, that is 100% accurate. You're looking at me like I'm crazy for. That is accurate.
No, it's just Burning Wheel.
You don't like Burning Wheel. Do you like Burning Wheel?
I love
forget.
Burning Wheel.
Me too.
I love. It's one of my favorite books. I worked very hard. I have the original Adventure Burner right here.
Oh, the Green Book. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
A horse ate it. See? Okay, so here's the thing. You were completely correct when you said Burning Wheel was complex, and it absolutely is. It's just Mouse Guard does it better. That's all I can say.
I think Mouse Guard does some parts of it better. I don't think Mouse Guard does combat well at all.
Mouse Guard does it a little bit better. Conflicts in Mouse Guard, yes, it's turn by turn volley based gameplay. It's such a big game, Throck. Burning Wheel is such a big game. And I don't know where to start in trying to say bad things about it.
I said bad things about it. I'm not going to get upset. It's one of my favorite games, and it has parts that suck. Like
I love reading Burning Wheel.
Oh my god, yeah.
I love creating like my own little idea characters in it, just by using the life paths. Like I think it's a great creative resource.
Right?
I think it's just, unless you have the right people to play it with, it's not going to be a fun game. Like do you remember when I told you that Blades in the Dark doesn't have a lot of it has too many options?
Yes.
Burning Wheel is worse than that.
I would say it's differently optioned.
It is different, yes, but like while Blades in the Dark can codify failure mechanically and trying to assign it, in Burning Wheel you have to like just understand what needs to happen as a consequence to a player as they are performing their character's belief and instinct. Yes. It's so demanding for its GM. It's very demanding
for a GM. And what I would say, in high stakes situations where outcomes matter a lot, right? I would say it's incredibly demanding of the GM. I would say that in general narrative play, it's no more or less demanding than anything else, right? And one of the things I think that is good about Blades in the Dark is it forces you to kind of think much more, or not Blades in the Dark, Burning Wheel, it kind of forces you to think longer term for character arcs for your stories, because you know that if you're going to get hurt, it's going to take time. You know that there's no magical travel. You know, so it fosters political stories, I think, better than some other games do. It fosters interpersonal relationship better than a lot of fantasy games do, I think, because you're forced to be more in that world, like by the very mechanics of the game, which is something that I enjoy. But I do think you're right. I think at its extremes, it is incredibly demanding.
However, it's a game that has so much to teach. It does very good storytelling in a very natural sense when it puts the players at the heart of it. It is a game that is all about challenging a character's beliefs, and like the Adventure Burner right here, like I'd say this should just be its own book. Like, you like this should just be a universal campaign book for any system. The lessons in Burning Wheel can be used for many, many, many role-playing games, and I really think that its influence is probably its biggest, what's the word? Not success. Its biggest
legacy?
Contribution to role-playing games in the past few years.
Yeah. No, it's foundational to a lot of stuff that's happening right now.
There you go. I think it makes a great foundation. It's a nice house to live in, but when you want to build your own place and move out of your parents' house, it's marvelous.
Yeah. Okay. So
I'm sorry, no millennial can relate to that that particular example or metaphor. I haven't built a house. Where am I going to build a house?
Right. Okay, so we've only got about a half an hour left, so I'm going to condense the last two questions we had into picking one of your choice, modern or futuristic,
Oh boy.
for the game that you would like to talk about for this second part here, because we've just had an amazing conversation about 4 amazing systems, but it took an hour, and that's okay. That's what we're here for. We're here to have a good conversation and call audibles when we're done. So we started with Jack the last time, right? So we're gonna start with nerdy this time, and your favorite, or at least the game you would most like to tell us about that is from a modern or futuristic standpoint.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about Scion. I'm going to talk about Scion. I haven't got to run it. I've read Hero mostly. Looked through the character creation, which honestly, storytelling system character creation is probably one of my favorite character creations.
Yeah.
It's it's wonderfully simplistic when it needs to be, and just as and usually complicated where it needs to be. Um, for Scion, I love that the boons and the birthrights are connected, that can be connected, specifically the relics. When your powers are limited by how you can use them rather than what their power is.
Yeah.
You have to be able to use your knife to get the boon that goes with it. And I love that so much. It makes I feel like it would make for very good storytelling.
So start us back at the beginning. What is Scion? What is its setting? What is the deal? Like, what if you were to what is this game? What is it?
Scion it's modern, very modern. You are a Scion, a child of the gods. Your character learns that they are such, and then you gain your birthrights, which give you your connection to the gods. But other than that, you are, until you have your birthrights and your boons and all of that stuff that you get for that, you are technically a normal person who lived a normal life until you found out you were the child of a god, which is a fascinating part of the game.
Yeah. And one of the things White Wolf does well is the fish out of water. Like, I'm this thing now. What the fuck? Yeah.
Like, I've played a campaign of Scion before, and one of my favorite parts of that campaign was being introduced to their parent gods. That interaction was just so otherworldly and amazing, and so different between characters. Oh my gosh.
I also love the fact that the game basically states from the beginning, and the original playbook only has so many, and then there's expansions, but it basically states from the beginning, all gods exist. You can be from any religion, your parent can be virtually anything, and they have a wide range of gods even in just the hero book, just the starter without any supplements. You got a wide range of stuff you can be, from Greek to voodoo. And I kind of love that idea of just the variety of gods, and the idea of they all exist and they all have certain command over it. And then, of course, where you really come in as part of the story is the gods are disconnected from the world a little bit at this point because of the Titans, and the Titans have released their Titan spawn. You got to help the gods by fighting the Titan spawn, basically, and you need your birthrights and such to do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd get trounced.
So, wow, this came out way later than I thought it did, too. This came out in 2007. Is that really right? This came out in 2007 originally? It feels like it came out... Hang on. Yeah. First
Yeah.
edition, April 2007. I was gonna say it's such a product
Back when
of
I
its,
started playing it.
right? It's such a product of its time with like American Gods and Sandman, but it's really 8 to 10 years after that. So it's fascinating to me. It is a White Wolf game, so it is pools of D10s, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
So many
handfuls of them.
D10s.
Yeah.
It's exalted level D10s.
Yeah. By the way, someday I want to run a Dragon Blood game. I really, really do. And the new edition of Dragon Blood. But that's for another day. If you were to take away one thing from the game, like, and this isn't like your selling point for it, but like, if you were to be like, oh my god, this game jazzed me up so hard because XYZ, what is it? What is the feel for you? Why does it get you hyped up? Why do you want to play it? Why have you been reading all the books?
Oh. I'm actually, I love gods and stuff, and actually if I didn't know about this game in 2007, and I was deep in Rick Riordan books in 2007, so if I'd found this game then, I would have ran off with it. Yeah, I mean, I love gods, I love mythology, and when you take that and you transplant it into a modern world and how to make that work and is often so great, and they do a good job of it in the lore. You can read right off the bat, it starts you off with a great story of that kind of gets you into the feel of how the gods work and how the world works and how people can kind of coast through the world without knowing what the Titanspawn are doing. And I mean, those stories are great too. And I don't usually read a lot of the stories in books, but this one was great. And yeah, I get jazzed up for the mythology, and then the what is it? There's a word for it, and I can't think of it, but I know there's
Like
there's a
building?
genre. Well, yeah, the world building, but there's a genre specific term now for the kind of books that bring in mythology to the modern.
I don't know what
setting,
that
and
is. But I believe you, and it sounds amazing. Yeah. So, one sentence pitch line. Scion.
One sentence. Get to play an OP character and just have fun with it. That's
Awesome.
it. That's
Yay.
We're gonna be gods, angry vampire gods.
I'm an angry vampire guy.
and Scion goes from hero to demigod all the way, like it goes all the way to you being an actual god.
Oh, holy shit. Oh, yeah, I think I knew that.
Oh, it's so cool.
Yeah. But to not do a White Wolf game next, I'm going to call on 4 because I know what Jax is already. So, 4, modern or futuristic?
Can it be both?
It can be.
Because
Yes.
I came prepared.
Yeah.
So for modern, The Secret World of Cats. It
I know
is
nothing about that
a game, a hack of the Fate core system, and it is a game in which you play cats that protect their burdens, which are the humans that they are fond of. But as we all know, humans cannot know of the secret world that the cats engage in. It is a role-playing game all about essentially supernatural, but with cats. They have these parliaments of cats for different parts of the region you live in, and there are rules and there are secret sects of magic that can be used. And it's also just I love the baseline descriptions for how the magic works. You have to hunt a mouse and leave it outside of your burden's house so that it protects them from ghost spirits and dark presences that might make their life scary or difficult, or they may haunt their dreams. And it's just a wonderful little peek into I want to play a kitty, and I want that kitty to hunt ghosts. It's really interesting. And for a game like Fate, which is a really simple system, We never got to it. Fate is one of those games that is supposedly universal, and
Yes.
in my opinion, it does function that way in various states. But
So
this
what
one
is
is
the-
particularly good.
So I've never played a Fate game. It's on my list to play one at some point, so I understand the system. But what's the Fate system then?
Fate system is essentially make a high aspect for your character, make a trouble for your character, and then make a what is it? You make a.
It's just more aspects.
It really depends. It's more aspects. So basically, the way players influence the game is that they have their skills that they can use to solve problems like, intimidation or gunplay or hunting mice. But you can use aspects of your character to sort of influence the fate points that you can spend, or what sort of zones might have certain aspects. So fate is all about like invoking motifs, essentially. Like you can create a feeling in a scene, and that scene can aid you or your enemies. And it's sort of like a really interesting like build a scene structure with the characters that are in the scene, and then the players can sort of fight to get as much advantage as they can when the final roll comes to solve the problem. And there might be banishing a ghost with these cats. It might be taking over a piece of territory from a coven of crows or something like that. It's just a very unique take on a supernatural game where the focus isn't on the people, it's on the animals that are aware. What's that comic book that is about the animals that can see dead people? Okay, so here's the thing. What is it? Oh my god! I'm so mad right now. You need to read this comic book about animals that see dead people. Oh fuck, I don't have it. Beasts of Burden. Go read Beasts of Burden and then buy this game. Then play it. It's a fantastic take on it. That's my modern take.
Okay.
My other take was gonna be Burning Empires, but this is almost impossible to play if you thought Burning Wheel was tough. Instead, Starblazer Adventures.
Starblazer.
Starblazer Adventures, a rock and roll space opera adventure game.
What?
Guess what?
Never heard of that game.
It's very British in UK. It's very it's based on a long-running serial comic that was black and white, and it was like in newspapers. It is basically rock and roll space opera. It's so high energy, super corny, and space opera-y. It is amazing. I love it.
So
it
it's
is
70s, 80s sci-fi.
Yes, the best.
That's amazing.
Yes, and once again, it's fate. So you don't have to worry about, oh, what if I want to make a robot character? What if I want an alien character? I want them to have 6 arms and a big butt. You could do it. You could do it in Fate. Fate will allow you to do it. It's great. And it has ship combat. It has not a lot of setting, but it's just a really romantic game. And I played it with some of my good friends. This is like the second game I played after Mouse Guard.
Okay.
And it's a big chunky book, and unfortunately this copy uses old Fate rules, Fate sort of simplified over time, but you could just crush this game. And there are so many cool stunts and ships that you can buy. There's a stunt or aspect for a ship called Spiky Hedgehog. And the ship is arranged to stop boarding attempts. There's so many ways you could characterize your characters in a sci-fi setting, or even your ship. Your ship is basically a character for your group. And I really would want to talk about the campaign I ran in this setting because it was all about rock and roll, space lawyers, and sentient ships. It's incredible. It's a wonderful game. That's my futuristic game. I also say Animorphs should also be the combination of the two, modern and futuristic, because I made a game called Morphs in the Dark where you play Animorphs, and that's
I know. I want to play it
where
someday.
you go.
Although I know nothing about Animorphs.
Oh, I don't care. It's so good.
Animorphs in the Dark.
Me being the creator,
I think it's so great that I made this.
Awesome. And because we got 15 minutes left, I'm going to go to Jack, and you're going to tell us what your favorite modern or futuristic game is.
Here it comes.
So this
Here
is
it
gonna be a
comes.
big old shock to so many people. World of Darkness Vampire. I mean, that was my first system. It still has such a love of mine. I mean, recently we had not even recently now, oh gosh, it's been a while. We had our 1940s campaign of Vampire that was just, fantastic. And, when we talk about, so I want to mention something like from way back during the Burning Wheel discussion is the thing that I think would turn me off of Burning Wheel the most is the crunchy combat. Because my
We don't use
least
it.
favorite,
We don't use it. Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
But my least favorite thing about D&D is combat. I hate it. I feel the game just goes breaks, and then you're just like. Whereas I like Vampire because it is such a flowing story. I mean, it is constant interaction. Like even combat, it's fast. I mean, you do not have very drawn out vampire combats because it gonna be brutal. And the most drawn out combat we had was probably against the werewolf, and it was wild. It was fun to be part of. It was just so fantastic. I love it so much.
So why?
Yeah.
What is it about Vampire that makes you love it so much?
Sometimes I like being a monster. I mean, I'm a monster every single day of my life, according to the majority of people out in the world. Haha, go fuck yourself. But you know what? It's kind of the same kind of reason I play Tieflings and stuff is sometimes I want to be the goddamn monster. And this allows me to do that, but also have really in-depth stories in that whole space.
Yeah.
And yeah, I like storytelling. I like deep, visceral storytelling. And I mean, speaking of visceral storytelling, those of you who have seen me play as a Meatsy, yeah, it's an ability to just go way out there and do something weird,
Yeah.
but also really fun. Just so much
Yeah.
fun for me. Oh my god.
And context for those who have not played or seen Vampire before, it is a World of Darkness game by White Wolf, where you play one of a number of clans of vampires, and they're vampires, each with their own specific powers and lineages in this giant political drama of doom. It is as much a political game as it is a I'm going to go hunt people and suck their blood game. In fact, for me, the thing I love the most about Vampire is the politics. I don't care that I'm a night-dwelling, blood-sucking, whatever. Literally almost never enters my mind when I play. Don't care about it. Not a thing that comes up for me. The politics, on the other hand, are, and especially in my favorite version of the game, which is Requiem, the politics of it are multi-layered and fascinating. And to me, that is the part that I love the most. But Jack, there are 5.5 editions of Vampire the Masquerade. Yes, 5.5. What is your, or
Yeah.
between Vampire the Masquerade and Requiem, do you have a favorite?
V20.
V20.
Would
Yeah.
probably be V20. It took because there was a lot of creep. There was almost as much creep in Vampire as there is in Shadowrun 4th Edition, and that's saying something. So there was a lot of creep, and V20 just said, okay, all of this creep, let's just shove it into a corner here and put it all in one central place and smoothed it out. And it was so much easier to run in that respect. And frankly, it's still a hell of a lot better than 5th edition, in my opinion.
I 100% agree. I don't think you're wrong at all.
Yeah.
I think 5th edition has real problems on both a philosophical level and a mechanics level, that as we played through it became increasingly clear. And so I'm perfectly happy to stay with Requiem 2nd edition, because to me, that is the best iteration of vampire role-playing. And for you, V20 is the best iteration of vampire role-playing. But if you like, I'm not going to talk about Mage, because I don't have enough time, and I really want to talk about Shadowrun 4th edition, actually, and why I think it's one of the best role-playing games you can play. But if you love modern mysticism, modern weirdness, modern horror, you should check out the Chronicles of Darkness and late World of Darkness role-playing games for some really great iterations of that. Keep in mind that they do not take the same... Well, the newer Chronicles of Darkness stuff does, and the newer Vampire stuff that Bionic's Path does, take a pretty good eye to inclusion. It's not perfect. There are some troublesome bits in them, and you do want to be careful about that. But if you're looking for some really great modern grimdark horror weirdness, that is a great place to do it. For me, I want to talk about Shadowrun. First of all, because I did a little work for Shadowrun back in the day during 3rd edition and 4th edition, and I've loved it ever since. And it is like the first role-playing game I got to play when I went to college in '97, and to start with why I like Shadowrun. If you've never heard of Shadowrun before, what rock have you? No, I'm totally kidding. It is a cyberpunk game in which magic came back to the world in 2012. Along with magic coming back to the world, there are now orcs and elves and trolls and dwarves and all that sort of stuff.
And the internet.
And the internet. And so it is, its tagline is incredibly specific and very short. It's where man meets magic and machine. The year, depending on when you play, is the late 2060s. And so you live in a wireless world of augmented reality along with magic and all that sort of stuff. And there's mega corporations in the United States splintered apart into Native American nations and the kind of former Union along with Canada, and then the South, and then like California essentially on its own, and there's an Elven nation. And so shit fell apart after the Awakening. And so now you are a doer of deeds that are probably illegal within that world, whether for politicians or for criminals. You're doing corporate espionage, spy missions, you're abducting people. You are a shadow runner. You are a deniable asset in a world of high intrigue and combat. And it is an incredibly crunchy game. 4th edition is by far, to me, 4th edition 20th anniversary is the best iteration of the game. It has the clearest set of rules. It has kind of the clearest combat system. Although, if you have wired reflexes in that game, it means you're going to be going 3 times to everyone else's 1. So be ready for that. I know you're going to say Anarchy, but Anarchy, and we can talk about this in a second, but Anarchy's not Shadowrun. Anarchy is fun. I love it. Shadowrun, it's not. It's like. But here's my problem. Design-wise, they're still... Okay, so Shadowrun Anarchy, for those of you who don't know, the reason... My quick reason for why I love Shadowrun, it is a crunchy simulationist version of the future that isn't a dry, hackneyed piece of crap like Cyberpunk was. Now, I haven't read Cyberpunk Red, so I don't know if it's still a derivative piece of crap. But when it first came out, it was a derivative piece of crap. And Shadowrun was a breath of fresh air in which a whole world existed that made sense to me, and I thought in an interesting and unique way. So that's why I love it. It's doing crime in the future with all sorts of cool bits and baubles. The core complaint about Shadowrun is that it is much like Burning Wheel, too complex for its own good. In fact, this gentleman took a lot of his inspiration for this game from Shadowrun 3rd edition, which is why they feel vaguely similar. What? 4?
Oh, it's nothing. It's just I played Shadowrun on Bubbernut's channel, and we got into a car chase, and it lasted about 5 hours.
So, and
I was unconscious for the first 30 minutes, so that was fun.
And so this is just like with Burning Wheel, just like with D&D, and just like I think with any role-playing game. The GM has to adjust the rules to work for the table they're at, right? And to work for the
By
level
playing
of fun.
Anarchy.
By not playing Anarchy, because here's the problem with Anarchy. It's supposed to be designed to work with 6th edition, but changed nothing in the rules, and it doesn't really reflect 5th edition's rule set either. And so it's this weird thing that exists in limbo as a product that doesn't lead you into any of their major products and is never coming out with anything new.
Look, I'm about to have my Shadowrun Salt as well. 4th edition is when it stopped being good because they got rid of all their good designers. I'm saying 4th edition was the last time it was good because they got rid of all their good designers in 5th and 6th edition. So
They absolutely 100% did, and
There
the
you
art is
go.
crap. Sorry.
Yeah, I follow Roll4It, and they got an early copy of 6th edition, and they stopped playing it because they had to hack so much of it to make it work.
Yeah.
They left.
Whoa, really?
Stopped after
Yeah.
Oh,
3.
wait.
Oh my god!
There's about 6th edition where the goal is to become Corp. Where's the cyberpunk in that again exactly?
Wait, is
I
that a
didn't
thing?
become Corp. My character was Corp.
Ugh. Oh,
Yeah,
So-
they
Oh my
did
God!
a
you
lot of it
killed
in
the
6th to
cyberpunk
make-
politics for what? For what?
Yeah,
I'd love to be Corp. They have a great job.
which is
I
why I
get
want to
great
do
benefits.
a Blades in the Dark hack of
There
Shadowrun.
you go.
This is my
oh my
plan.
god, there's so many good
That'd
Blades
be
in the
cool.
Dark hacks for that.
Are there? Well, I want to do my own because I love Shadowrun more than anyone else, and I'm
Go
smarter
ahead.
than all of them. No, I'm totally kidding. I just want to do my own because I want to read a game anyways. But yeah, so we're gonna do a quick flash round. This is a game you haven't talked about before that you think everyone should go try and play. That this is
Oh
a
my
game
God.
that somebody should that you want to play. Just what is it and why?
Oh my god, yes.
And we'll start with Jack.
All right, so I know before we started the stream, I said one thing, and I'm about to throw an audible and play for the Queen.
Why?
It is a GM-less game system. It's a tabletop card system, but it is so hackable. I have played one game of the base game, and I have been making hacks of it ever since. And it is fun.
What's
to
the
just
point of the game?
take that system. Basically, you are the retinue that travels with a queen. There are cards that tell you what's going to happen. Like, you have to answer the cards. And when you answer the cards, like, what is the queen? The queen makes you feel beautiful. And you consider yourself ugly. Why is that? And then you have to answer that. And other players can ask you questions to, like, further the narrative of that. At the end, you decide, are you going to defend the queen or are you not going to defend the queen?
Oh wow.
And yeah,
Okay.
the last time we did it, it was for the prom queen, and oh my god, it was catty and amazing.
Yeah. Sweet.
Oh yeah, it was so fun.
4. What's your game?
But play it.
All right, so if you're not going to play Mouse Guard, but you still want to play a fun Red Wally animal game, here, play Iron Claw.
Oh my god, Iron Claw.
Yes. So Iron Claw, I went to a convention and I got to play Iron Claw, and it was pretty interesting, and it convinced me to spend a lot of money. They have settings that are strangely really well built and researched. About half of each of these books is made up for a different setting. Iron Claw has a great dice system. I love the way you roll dice in that game for skill challenges. Combat can be a little clunky, but it seems to be a really well put together game, and like, you could just devote an entire game to the history. It does, however, have a lot of working parts that you as a GM and players need to work out beforehand, because once again, there's a lot of politics, there's a lot of, weird magic. But yeah, I think it's an interesting game, and there's a lot of content out for it, more so than D&D, I think, in some cases, in certain editions. God, what else? Also, the production company Sanguine has had 16 Kickstarters, and their most recent one for Usagi Yojimbo is it had $2,200 as its goal. It is currently about to pass 18,000.
I want to play Usagi Yojimbo.
Yeah. So it's also using Powered by the Apocalypse.
Oh, okay. I'll still play it.
But yeah, these guys know what they're doing. They have a setting where there's a there's a China setting for historical people who want to experience dynasties. There's a vivid European setting where the merchant guilds are trying to take over while the monarchy is declining. And there's I believe it's a Middle Eastern setting, or is it an African setting? Oh my God, I'm so stupid. That's
okay,
the setting I
yeah.
haven't read into very much.
Okay.
But honestly, like, just like some of the art is really, it's furry, and some of the art is like, this is what Brian Jacques would make. It's really interesting, and I really think it's an underplayed game.
Okay. Nerdy.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure I'm in the right crowd for this. There's a lot of games to go play. Go find them. Go on Twitter, find all the games, and also play the Buffy the Vampire Slayer role-playing game.
Yes.
Cortex system, right?
Uni system.
Uni system, my bad. Yeah. Why?
Why? It's exactly what you want for a Buffy game. It literally is. It has the rules. You can play a witch, and the witch is as much fun as you would think it would be. It's great for long campaigns and telling emotional stories. And if you're the Slayer, you actually get to be near indestructible while everybody else spends time in the hospital. The story is 100%, not 100%, but it is about the Slayer and how the other characters relate to the Slayer.
Yeah. Cool. Because it must be really. We're running short on time, but I now have questions about this that I will ask you off stream. But it sounds fascinating, and I want to check it out. So for my game, I'm going to go the 7th Second Edition. Why? Because it puts the premium on narrative. It allows the players to define the story they want to tell, and it does so with verve and panache of swashbuckling. It is a game set in a very interesting form of Earth in the 1600s that's a lot like our own but very different, and you are heroes, capital H heroes, with hero points that you spend to do heroic shit, and you're a fucking hero in that game, and it's great. And I think the best part about it is actually being able to define your own stories at the beginning of the game, and then that is how you dictate your advancement, not by how many people you kill, not by how many milestones you hit, but when you've completed a story, you get something for it. You get something that you have defined that you wanted to achieve for your character for it. And that's why I love it. And I think it's innovative and cool, and people should check it out. Okay, with that.
And it's hacked into our current 5th edition game.
And it's hacked
on
into our current
Fridays.
5th edition game on Fridays, which you should totally check out. 9 p.m. Eastern. So let's go around, get everyone to tell us where we can find you on the internet. And yeah, any final closing thoughts on games not called D&D? We'll start with Nerdy.
Hey, yeah, again, just go out there, find games, go on Twitter. There's all kinds of, go in the tabletop current RPG community there, try to avoid some of the drama and look at what everybody's playing, and you'll find amazing games. There's so many. I mean, you can even just look on Drive-Thru-RPG. It has a lot of games, and it'll lead you down some interesting holes, but you can find some amazing stuff there. And as for me, you can find me Thursday nights here for a hack powered by the Apocalypse, Power Rangers inspired Millennium Nights. That's 8 p.m. ET on Thursdays. Wednesdays, right now I'm doing a little thing. I'm calling Nerds with One Shots on a little channel that I started so I could play a couple extra times a week without getting in the way of Welcome to Party's mission. And I'm doing some one shots, and this week is planned to be for the Queen, actually. So,
Neat. And that is on
then
Wednesdays at what time?
8 p.m. ET. So
Awesome.
And then earlier today was the first episode of a mini series for Keepers Noir. That's Sundays 9 a.m. ET.
Awesome. 4.
So, I am 4. As you might have guessed, I play Mouse Guard. I run it here on Welcome to the Party. Saturdays. It was yesterday. Oh my God. And lots happened. And I don't really run a lot of things on my channel because I am a horse groom. My job is very, 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 very intensive. and I often need naps. So I don't stream as much as I used to, but I do have the inclination to start making a podcast where I talk about the various things you have heard about today, such as Storycraft and tabletop role-playing games, and how those two intersect to create valuable experiences for all of us. What else? Also, I made a game called Morphs in the Dark, and it's a hack of Blades in the Dark where you play Animorphs, and I am gay. There you go.
Where can we find your podcast?
It is called All's Quiet on the Forefront, and you can see it on Anchor primarily, but you can also visit, probably a few other places, and it'll be there. Or on my Twitter feed, on the Forefronts.
On the Forefronts. And Jack.
Hey everybody, I am Capcheck, or at Captain Jake Cross on the Twitters, and you can find me here every Friday night on Welcome to the Party with our Blood and Shackles Hack to Pieces D&D 5th edition game, and as well as Saturday nights for our Stars Asunder game of... What's this? Right, Scum and Villainy,
Scum and
where
Villainy.
we play Space Bastards.
Yay, Space Bastards.
Yeah, and as far as like any other stuff, nothing else coming up yet that I'm aware of. Maybe we'll see. But yeah, I love playing games. You can find me all over the place, and definitely join our Discord if you're not already there. We talk about all sorts of different systems and stuff there, and recruit for all sorts of really cool games. So get on over there and get some weird games in. It's a lot of fun.
Hell yeah. And I'm Sean, also known as Thrak, co-founder here. Welcome to the party. And you can, of course, find me here on Sunday nights doing this, and right after this on Sunday nights, except for this week, running Emerald Knights and Neurospikes, a Shadowrun 4th edition campaign over on Devil's Luck Gaming. Tuesdays and Wednesdays, you can find me playing Rifts and Blade in the Dark at 8 p.m. Eastern here on the channel. And then on Fridays, you can find me at 9 p.m. running our 7th Sea-inspired D&D 5e campaign, Blood and Shackles. And with that... we're going to call that an amazing show. You all were wonderful, thoughtful, and I love you, and thank you. And we will go raid our friends at... I haven't said hi to Power Score. We're going to go raid Power Score. Raid Power Score RPG. So, we're going to go raid Power Score RPG. Your job is to show Power Score RPG all the love in the world when we get over there. Say hi if you can. Copy or paste that thing you see there in the little thingy if you can. But with that, we're going to go and say bye, and we love you very much, and we will see you tomorrow at 4 p.m., right? 4 p.m.? 4 p.m. tomorrow? 2
Don't look
p.m.
at me.
2 p.m. Eastern for Unknown Girls Society and Unknown Armies campaign. Okay, we're out. Bye! And we're out.